Okay, good evening everyone. We might get a start to our event tonight. So those people who are just sort of wandering around, find yourself a seat. We no doubt will have people trickle in as we come in as well. So thank you for coming along tonight. I'd just like to start our night by paying our respects to the peoples of the Kulin Nations on whose traditional estates we meet today, to their ancestors and to the children who we are educating into the future. I also acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. So welcome to our Exploring Problem-Based STEM Teaching Approaches night. My name's Lucas Johnson. I'm the Research and Development Manager here in the Faculty of Education at Monash, and I'll be taking you through tonight's workshop. So the aim of tonight is to be a workshop-based night. We've got a range of experts who are here to support us going through a real-world STEM problem. So, I need my clip. Is that working? Sorry, the clicker is off. Okay, so tonight we really encourage you to, if you have a Twitter account, to tweet your learning from tonight or things that stand out to you. So as you do, if you can tweet at Monash Education, if you can tag, and also put the hashtag Monash STEM, that would be fantastic to allow people to follow along part of the conversation. So the idea is to get those people who may not be present, be able to follow along and get the idea of what's happening on the night. So we really do encourage you to do that. And you will see that the handle and the hashtag are on the bottom of the slides, and they'll be up there throughout the night. Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to introduce all of our speakers for tonight. So tonight, our first speaker will be Dr. Cathy Smith, who is a Senior Lecturer in Science Education. Cathy, if you can just quickly stand up. Cathy's also our course leader for the Graduate Certificate in STEM Education. We also have Dr. Jennifer Mansfield. Jennifer, you can stand up, please. She's a lecturer in Science Education, and she's going to be our science specialist for tonight. We have Dr. Amber McLeod over the back there. Amber is our lecturer and a digital education research team member. We have Mr. Greg Hellard. Where's Greg? So Greg's our engineering expert tonight. So Greg was a design engineer in the medical electronics industry for over 30 years, specialising in the design of robotics control for medical pathology instrumentation. He's now currently a STEM coordinator at Huntington School in Mount Waverley. Thanks, Greg. He's also one of our Graduate Certificate in STEM Education students. We also have Dr. Hazel Tan. Hazel is our lecturer in maths education, and she has a passion for STEM education research. And then we also have Professor Amanda Berry. Thanks, Mandy. So Mandy is our professor in STEM education, and she's also the Associate Dean of Research. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cathy Smith to come up and give us a little bit of an introduction into project-based learning and design-based learning. Problem-based learning, sorry.
Thanks, Lucas. I'd like to start really by giving you some ideas to think about in relation to problem-based learning, and this might become sort of the foundation of the work that you cover across the evening. Problem-based learning is really a method of learning and teaching which allows the students to focus on how and what they will learn. So it's extremely student-centred by intention. It seems odd to say this, but it's important to say that when we talk about problem-based learning, the problems need to be those that are often unfamiliar or non-routine. So a problem by its very nature is something that you're confronted with that you don't immediately know the answer to. And then that prompts you to think about how you might work through a process to solve that problem. And in a very simple sense, sometimes solving a problem is about drawing on any existing relevant knowledge that you may have that may contribute to that problem, thinking about how you might be able to use that to propose a solution, perhaps trialling that solution and then evaluating how effective that solution was. Problem-based learning usually refers to an opportunity for students or people to work in small groups as collaborative work. And as I said before, it's about allowing students to utilise their prior knowledge in the topic area, and as they do so, identify the gaps in their knowledge as they attempt to solve a problem. So the intention of problem-based learning is very much for students to be self-directed, interdependent, as well as independent learners, as they attempt to solve a set problem. Now, what's interesting about problem-based learning is that the origins of problem-based learning as an educative approach really reside firmly in the tertiary education sector. This was an approach that particularly emerged from such areas such as engineering, medicine, and other areas of clinical practice. The approach was seen as an opportunity for learning which engaged students in deep learning by aligning university courses with the expected professional work of graduates. So in other words, often the problems that the students were invited to explore replicated the sorts of issues and problems they might face in their career in the workplace. And so there was a strong link, a strong attempt actually to build links between theory and practice. The nature of those problems actually reflects the types of experiences that the students would encounter. Now, there's an interesting challenge that's inherent in this, because for problem-based learning to be really effective, it requires what Savin Baden calls a characteristic flexibility, a capacity of time, an opportunity to work together in different ways to try to find a diverse range of solutions to a problem, to build partnerships where needed, sometimes with outside organisations, to enhance the problem-solving capacity of those working to solve the problem. Now, in some literature around school-based problem-based learning, this is raised as perhaps an inherent challenge for school-based learning. Can we provide the flexibility that is required to really enact problem-based learning in the way that it was intended? Another thing to think about in terms of problem-based learning is that what has emerged as a result of this work, and sometimes project-based work, has been design thinking models, such as the Stanford design thinking model, which has emerged as a very useful way of breaking down the thinking phases of problem-based learning. Various stages of these models, regardless of the model, seem to highlight the importance of taking time to seek to understand the problem from a range of perspectives. So that immersion in the problem initially becomes really important. There's also time dedicated to using this information to define the problem, identify the objectives, what actually needs to be achieved, try to explore the associated decisions that need to be worked through, and the challenges that are anticipated in terms of reaching that solution. There's also usually a phase somewhere in the design thinking models which is about a chance to ideate and share ideas that emerge. And in this stage, there is a great value placed on the diversity of responses, and then some attempts to perhaps prioritise those responses, which ones may be more suitable than others. In some design models, there's also the opportunity to create prototypes and mock-ups of potential outcomes. And the idea of fail fast sort of resides in this particular stage, and you may have heard of that sort of comment before. Failure being seen as an essential aspect of the design process, an experience that actually enhances the insight about the problem itself and potential solutions that could be reached. And then, of course, there's always the phase of testing and evaluating the solutions. So there's various design models models that are out there. Stanford is often one that's referred to quite a lot, and those phases of thinking and interacting with the problem are inherent in those models. I'm going to leave you with this thought because this is something that we in the faculty are grappling with at the moment. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that problem-based learning may offer some real potential and advantages in schools for students, particularly around areas like engagement, critical and creative thinking. But we are at a stage where we lack some rigorous research evidence to support how this approach is being implemented in schools, what it actually looks like, and the impact that this approach is actually having on learning. Does it look the same in primary schools to the way it looks in secondary schools? What are the constraints and challenges that schools face given the level that the students are in terms of their education, and some of the inherent structures within schools that perhaps get in the way of that flexibility that I was talking about before? So that gives you a few things to think about in relation to problem-based learning, where it's come from, what the intentions are, and some of the design thinking processes that have emerged to perhaps enhance some of the processes of problem solving that are embedded in that process.
Thank you. We thank Kathy for her time. She has to shoot off and teach a class now, so we really appreciate her coming down to talk to us beforehand. It's now time to get involved in a problem ourselves. So to take that understanding, that knowledge of problem-based learning, and to put it to work and into action in a problem. Our problem tonight is provided to us by the education team at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Cranbourne. And I don't think I'll say much more about it yet, and we'll unpack it as time goes on. So I'm hoping we might be able to get going.
We're here at the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria at the Cranbourne Gardens. This is a pretty spectacular site. We have got two sections of the garden: our Australian garden, which is an architecturally designed world award-winning landscape garden, and then we're surrounded by an incredible conservation zone which is over 1,000 acres in size. We're home to many different Australian species of plants and animals, and we are also the site of a nationally endangered species, the southern brown bandicoot. So one of the ongoing challenges that we face here at the gardens is roadkill. We are surrounded by urban areas, and we have gazetted roads which run through our site. So it poses a huge threat to the wildlife here, travelling around our site, being such an important conservation zone. One of the solutions we've put in place is to obviously have speed restrictions. We have on our main road, it's 25 kilometres at a height speed, and then you have a 10-kilometre zone as well once you enter the car park area of our site. We have got other signage up saying to look out for the wildlife, such as the bandicoots, snakes and wallabies here. We've also got speed humps to help slow the traffic too. And through other areas of the garden and along these main roadways, we have pegs that are marked out around about the 20-30 metres apart, and they're signed so that we can specifically identify where the roadkill has taken place, and all those details are recorded. So we do have a roadkill logbook, and everything is recorded in relation to the species, the location, the time of day that it was found, and if it was witnessed, exactly when it happened, etc. as well. Another method that we use to try and help reduce the flow of wildlife moving across the roads is the flashing on the mesh fences that we have. There's a number of different materials, from rubber materials through to lighter meshes, etc., that sit against the fence line so that the smaller animals like snakes and bandicoots won't travel through those fences and across the road. So this challenge that we face with roadkill is one of those ones that really tugs at the heartstrings here at the gardens. We conservationists. You know, we have many staff members here that work tirelessly to conserve the populations of wildlife here and to sometimes see dead wildlife on the road weekly, even daily, is something that just breaks our hearts.
Okay, so thank you to Sally for providing us with that authentic problem for tonight. The challenge we're going to do now is we're going to undertake a design sprint. So at your tables, you are going to be the students for the next 15 minutes. You will see on your tables that there are whiteboard markers, and we're going to address the question, how might we work to reduce the roadkill numbers to protect the native wildlife at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Cranbourne? Now, as you're going through that problem, we'd like you to think about these sort of things. What else do we need to find out before we can come up with a solution? And how might we apply our skills and knowledge in the STEM disciplines and beyond? Okay, so as you go through that, we're lucky enough tonight to actually have Sally, and we've got Ella here from the Royal Botanic Gardens. We can give her a clap, fantastic. They're going to be the people who might be able to give you some of that extra information that you need to know before you can come up with a solution. We'll also have our experts in the disciplinary areas wandering around as well to listen in on the conversations and see how you're addressing this challenge. For those people who are online, we've got Roland who will be running the conversation there, so don't feel like you're missing out with that there either. Okay, so let's take 15 minutes. All of the tables here are writable, so feel free to write on those with the whiteboard markers and try and come up with a solution for this problem. Okay, if I can bring your attention back here now, please. Now, when we said design sprint, we meant a sprint. There's not a huge amount of time tonight to go really deep into this problem. But I heard some great solutions already, but tonight we're not about, as much as it is important to come up with solutions, tonight we're going to now think about the kind of learning that's involved in this problem-based learning approach. Okay, so we're going to take another 10 minutes or so now to now think about these questions here. So the questions are, how might we teach and assess skills and knowledge in the STEM disciplines? And how could leveraging problem-based or design-based learning pedagogy enhance student learning with this kind of problem? Okay, so we're really going to sort of dive in and think about where is the opportunities to teach and assess the areas of STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths. What about other areas of curriculum, for example, capabilities, curriculum and so on? And how can this sort of approach really leverage that kind of learning? Okay, so let's take another 10 minutes now to discuss those questions at your table. Thank you. Okay, thanks for the lively discussion going on here. It's fantastic to hear, a big group of educators really getting involved in not only trying to come up with a solution to this problem, but also discussing the learning going on behind the problem. Now, I want you to hold on to your thoughts that are written there on your table. I do highly encourage you to maybe take photos of them. Feel free to tweet your ideas as well, using that @Monash Education handle and tagging or hashtag Monash STEM. But what I'm going to do now is actually invite up our experts that are here for tonight. And they're going to start unpacking some of the learning within their discipline area and discussing how you could leverage PBL for that kind of disciplinary understandings. So we'll start with Jennifer Mansfield, who will be covering our science area. Then we'll just follow the acronym of STEM and go through technology, engineering and maths. So I'll hand it over to Jen now.
Thank you, Lucas. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I would love to talk about my passion, and that is science and science education. So I love... So science is really concerned with the development of new knowledge and understanding the world in which we live in. And so when I sort of thought about this problem, I thought, fantastic. First, it was a biology problem, which is awesome. And then I thought, I can see with so many links to the science curriculum here and ways in which we can draw out really valuable learning. So I went across the curriculum. Now, I'm sorry for all the words on my slides. I know this is bad PowerPoint etiquette, but I thought I didn't want to leave anybody out from foundation all the way up to the senior years. So I thought about how I might be able to map across the curriculum. I thought about things like the living things in the park. We need to know a little bit about them before we can start to make some informed decisions. And I noticed on your tables you've already thought about those things. So which animals, are they diurnal, are they nocturnal, when are they most active? Something in particular in the foundation years, are they more active in summer or they're more active in winter? So reptiles, for example, might be more active when it's warmer rather than some of the other animals. So it's important knowledge for us to actually know, or if we don't know it, to find out before we start to look for our designed solution. Does anyone have anything else that I hadn't thought of here? Any other links to the curriculum that you could see? No, I'm sure there are others that you've got there. So then I thought about, okay, well, science, in the quest for new knowledge, has some processes that we kind of associate with science. And one of them being related to the science inquiry skills. Now, this process is only one way of generating knowledge, and it's a process that's kind of familiar and we associate with science. For example, posing questions. So what I did was I thought, we need to know something about the animals in the park, but then we also need to know something about how the animals are being killed. And so we can make, again, more informed decisions and help to use that toward the design process. So in the blue, I've got questions that I thought about, information that we would need to find out, or that students would find out, for example, and these aren't exhaustive, about how we actually might start to pose questions and make predictions. Planning and conducting. So if we were to look at the biodiversity of the animals, how would we know where they're most active? Are there only 2 bandicoots in the park? Or is there a whole family of bandicoots? Do they tend to stick to one particular area or do they move out? We don't know these things necessarily. And so science is a way of helping us actually find out that knowledge. We could do things like camera trapping. We could do sound recordings, things like that. Some of the other things that got me thinking was in the recording processing, we're starting to see that natural link to mathematics. Because in science, we do a lot of data crunching. We use numbers, we do graphs, we produce tables as a way of putting together the data that we find. And so I was starting to see that natural progression. The analysing and evaluating, starting to look for patterns, being able to make inferences. Drawing evidence-based conclusions, which is what we expect of scientists. Subjecting it to peer review. What do you think about this? How rigorous is this particular data set? How rigorous is this analysis, for example? And these are all things that, in varying degrees across the curriculum, we expect our students to be able to develop. And the last one, of course, is communicating our findings. And if you notice, straight from the curriculum, assist with... actually not from the curriculum, but this is one thing I've added in there, is using that information to start to make informed decisions. So we would communicate our findings as a way of starting to that design process. Another part of the curriculum which I think is sometimes overlooked is science as a human endeavour. Now the Victorian curriculum has put this under science understandings, but it's actually a really, really important part because this is the humanity of science. Science is a human creation. And so the science as a human endeavour draws our attentions to things like designing scientific understandings and discoveries are used to inform decisions. If we go up, advances in scientific understanding rely on developments in technology. Up in our reserve here at Jock Marshall Reserve, they have these camera traps. They're quite cheap now, but technology has advanced to a way that we can have these portable camera traps and they're quite economical to put around. So we can actually gather more data that we couldn't before, thanks to technology. Science as a human endeavour also draws our attention to the idea of failure in science. It's practiced in science, it's not well reported in science. Do we associate failure with science in schools? And I don't think we necessarily do. So one of the things I'd like to draw your attention to, and my title hasn't come up, this is a framework from Corrigan, Jones and Bunting. And they talk about that science is more than just factual understandings. It's actually a way of knowing. It's a verb rather than a noun. And that understanding is more than just understanding facts. It requires a number of skills. So being able to move between the different realms, such as the everyday and the scientific knowledge, being able to apply that. And then our competence or mastery really relies on our capacity to do these other things. So science offers us this fantastic opportunity, and our curriculum help guides us, but really we have this amazing curriculum area that contributes so much to STEM. So I'm going to pass on now to Amber, who's going to take us through the tea.
Thank you, Jen. Okay. So did you hear how many times Jen talked about technology? She sort of said it all for me, hasn't she? All right, so I just wanted to say a little bit about the digital technologies curriculum, because it's not, it hasn't been around that long, it's fairly new, and I certainly find a lot of people are a little bit nervous about what it means. There's IT in the curriculum in two different ways. One of them is the ICT capability, which is supposed to go across everything, all your subjects. And the other one is the technology strand, which has designing technologies and also digital technologies. Now, the only difference really between digital technologies, what counts as digital technology, and ICT capability is time. Okay, so at the moment, you would consider Word, PowerPoint, understanding how to save a file, knowing how to type, understanding how to print something, and ICT capability, because those things have been around so long, we assume everybody knows how to do them. The digital technologies is the newer stuff, right? But you can imagine in 10 years, the stuff we're doing in this digital technologies curriculum is actually going to move across into the ICT capability. But let's have a look at it. This is how it's designed. It's actually all about creating digital solutions. That's the whole aim of the curriculum. And it's broken into two parts: understanding digital systems. So do I understand that there are different components in a digital system that fit together so that I can take a photo on my camera, edit it on my computer and then print it? So just understanding that kind of idea. And then the other one is data and information. Most of us immediately think coding, but it's also things like understanding that that little floppy disk means save, even though we don't use floppy disks anymore on your Word document, right? And then together, you can use those to create digital solutions. So I just had a go at coming up with a couple of ideas for this particular problem, and both of them are framed by the same thing. So you've already heard about different ways of discussing how, or the language that you can use when you are discussing problems. Okay, so we have different types of thinking: design thinking, systems thinking, and so on. A big one in digital technologies is computational thinking, which sounds really scary, but it's just another one. It's just another framework so that you can think about how you can pull apart a problem, go through the process, and have a common language to discuss it. Okay, so the parts of that are decomposition, which is what is this problem? Pull it apart. Pattern recognition. So within the problem, can I see patterns? Or even, have I encountered something like this before? Can I see a pattern to other solutions? Abstraction, which is when you're getting rid of all the information that isn't really necessary and getting down to exactly what you want to do. And then the algorithm, which is basically the instructions or the recipe or the steps you're going to take in order to solve the problem. And then on top of that, which we've also heard before, after you've come up with an idea, you want to prototype it, you want to test it, and we want to fail early and fail often, because that's a big theme in technology. And then you do it all again. So let's have a quick look. This is a level 3-4 one. So for this, and this is some of the ideas I did see as I was walking around there, maybe your students decide they want to come up with a motion detector. You can use Lego to make a motion detector that has a light or has makes a sound. Maybe you want to create a website to make people more aware of this. This is all technology. So you might have your students working with a different focus in the same class. This is something that you would do over quite a long time, so it might be a one-term project. Now let's have a look at how this fits into the curriculum. So the first thing, if we're framing this around computational thinking, is what is the problem? So a class discussion, kind of like we did today, pulling it apart, exactly what information do we need? What is it that we really want to work out? So that is part of the Creating Digital Solutions curriculum. Then the next step is pattern recognition. So we're still in computational thinking, pattern recognition. So what have people done in other places? So Cranbourne Gardens is not the only place that has this problem. Where else can we see that happening? So we're looking for solutions that we can see in other places as well. And then could we work with other people to come up with some solution? Could we have an online chat with experts? Could we discuss this with people from Cranbourne Gardens, either face-to-face or, on Zoom or something? So then you're collecting the data also that they already have from the gardens and thinking about how you could manipulate that using digital technologies. Then the next step, abstraction. This is where you say, well, what's important here? Does it matter if the cars are red? Does it matter what time of day it is? So working out what's the important information, what's not the important information, and then what do we want to do? So for example, for this one, maybe you're going to make a motion detector, maybe you're going to develop a website. And then the final step is, okay, we've decided this is what we're going to do it. Now, how do we do it? What are the steps to doing it? And so you might, for example, if you're making a motion detector, particularly with that Lego kit, it has peripheral devices, which are sensors, lights, speakers, and so on. So that covers our digital systems one, which is understanding how all the hardware sort of fits together. With the website, developing plans, including a mock-up in PowerPoint using hyperlinked buttons. So that's down here, develop simple solutions using visual programs. Maybe the grade 3-4 students can't make as sophisticated a website as they would like to, but they can certainly mock it up in something like PowerPoint. And actually, maybe some of them could make a pretty good website by that point. And then explaining how your design will meet the community needs. So if you look at the curriculum there, you can really see it's got digital systems. How do all the parts fit together? The hardware in particular we're looking at here. The data and information, so understanding different types of data, how can we collect it, how can we access it, how can we use that information to solve problems, and then also working with other people. And then finally the digital solution there, which is the working through the computational thinking, developing the solutions. And then you would try it. So you'd prototype it, try it out. Certainly that last one, how the student develops solution in existing information meets common personal, school or community needs, you go out to the Cranbourne Gardens again. Hey, what about this? Would this work? Sure, you might have one tiny little Lego sensor, but it might work. And then you try it all again. So levels 9 and 10, I think this would be a similar kind of idea. You might give them a lot more freedom in what they're going to decide, whereas with the younger levels, you might have come up with the idea yourself. I think the important thing here is actually they might not be able to make anything because the thing that they've decided on might be so huge and intricate that they can't actually develop it. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't try, and that doesn't mean they can't do all that prototyping. So again, we're going through here, you're still doing the same steps. It's a bit more complicated on there, but basically it's the same stuff, it's just at a deeper level. Okay, and then the same thing at the end. So it's the same activity, but you're getting into more depth there. Okay, Greg.
Okay, I'm going to step away from curriculum just for a minute. Engineers, as an engineer, I'm frightened of curriculum. We've covered curriculum under science, under technology, and we'll cover it under maths. So where's the engineering part come in? Whoop. See, an engineer will solve this. So with this particular problem, not necessarily in the classroom yet, but with this particular problem, as an engineer, I use a thing called a V life cycle. There's a system level specification, there's a subsystem level specification, and then there's a unit specification. Now, this doesn't work in a classroom, it's too complicated. And in fact, as an engineer, I would split this up again into several of these to solve the problem. In a school, I would use this. This is the model that Kathy spoke of at the start of the lecture today. Empathise, divine, ideate, prototype and test. Within empathise, you develop an understanding of what you're looking at. So with this particular problem, as I've gone around the tables, I've said, well, what is it you're trying to solve? Do you really know? Most kids, and most engineers for that matter, will try and jump to the solution straight away. But is that really what you're trying to solve? So within empathise, you would go around and ask everyone. You would ask the gardens, you would ask the public, you would ask the visitors, you'd ask the CFA. All of their ideas on what it is that you're trying to solve. Then within that, after you gather that data, you then go and define exactly the problem you're trying to solve. Then in the middle, you've got ideate, you start to brainstorm potential solutions. Then you get into a prototyping stage where you've decided on a solution, then you start to build it, you test it, it fails, you go back and prototype it and test it, it fails, and you go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. Failure is good. I was just looking at the SpaceX site and found that they've had, I think, 7 major rocket failures since 2006, really public ones, where they take off, everybody's watching and it blows up. It didn't stop Elon Musk doing it, and he kept on doing it. So failure is good. That's a little bit more. That just really does start to break down what each of those, with respect to the Stanford design thinking process in its definition. Now this one's from my school. It's a year 4 problem about getting rid of a spider inside a classroom. And you can see that you can use that exact model to work through almost anything. Empathise, define the idea, make it specific, ideate, think of ideas that solve the problem, lots of ideas, draw it, prototype it, make a model. Now that's when we said before that the solution for Cranbourne might be too big for kids to solve, but they could make it smaller. Make a model, laser cut it, 3D print some parts of it. It's important, even with engineers, when we're working with a team, we have many engineers which have many different talents. Some are calculators, some want to get their hands dirty straight away and go to a solution. Some of them want to think about it. Some of them want to prove the principle. It's the same in the classroom as well. You'll have kids of all different abilities and mental abilities. And it's often the kids that are a little bit out there on the spectrum that come up with a fantastic idea on how to get the spider out of the room. Not necessarily one that everybody else has come up with. So it really gives us the ability to involve everyone. So engineering is the wrapper that picks up the science, the technology and the maths and gives you a process to follow, and this is the one I do because I think it's pretty cool. It gives you the process to follow, gives the kids confidence to fail, and you can scale it up and down depending on what level your kids are. So we use this all the way from year 4 and I'll put it into my year 10 STEM team in exactly the same way, exactly the same model. Maths.
Thank you. Maybe I have that. Okay, thanks. Okay, so before I continue, can I just have a show of hands? How many of you identify yourself as a science teacher? You know, it doesn't, I mean, like you can teach primary or early childhood, but as long as you think that, you know, you think about science, you think about teaching your students science, you know, that would be, you identify yourself as a science person or science teacher. Okay, hands up, yep, okay. What about technology? Technology? Yes. Okay, not as many, maybe more on this side. Engineering? Engineering? Fewer. Mathematics? Anybody mathematics? Okay, so that's still quite a fair bit. What about STEM? Do you see yourself as a STEM teacher? That's the other thing. Okay. Oh, not quite as well. Okay. Yep. Okay. So yeah. So the question is like, what do you think? You know, how do you see yourself as a teacher? What is your, you know, do you see opportunities in a problem like this? Do you see opportunities in teaching science, in teaching technology, engineering, and mathematics? So I think in today's session, that's what we are trying to, you know, to sort of get you become more aware and to start thinking about it. So so I'll just quickly share about the mathematics part. So, well, so if you are teaching mathematics, then I wouldn't say more about the curriculum because you already know it. And if you do not know it, actually, this is just a quick introduction. So there are actually 3 content strands. So there's numbers and algebra. measurement and geometry, and statistics and probability. So besides that, there's also 4 proficiency strands. That means, we want the students to be to have this mathematical understanding and develop fluency in solving problems and mathematical reasoning. And then, so the problem-solving skills, I think, is one of the important things to note. Okay, so one of the parts in the curriculum says that actually mathematics composed of multiple but interrelated concepts and which students apply. So I think one of the key areas is actually applying the mathematics that they learn. So, like it can be applied in different subject areas as well. So, so students sort of, as you can see just now when Jen talks about, science, you talk about looking at the table and the data, and also Amber also talked about that. So, but besides this, I just want to emphasize something else, which is the numeracy curriculum. The numeracy. So numeracy is actually one of the 7 general capabilities. So, which means that if you are, whatever subjects that you are teaching, you would consider integrating literacy, numeracy, technology, etc. And this is the numeracy components. So here I just want to talk very quickly. So you can see that these components involve some of the, there are some overlaps with the maths curriculum, of course, but they are sort of more identified as those that is useful across other learning areas and in your daily lives, in the students' daily lives too. So maybe just a quick look. So if you look at this, right, what do you think, as just now when you were, discussing, which numeracy elements did you use or did you come across? Statistics, interpreting the statistics, statistical information about the roadkill information, which part of the road, what time of the day, etc. Measurement. Pattern recognition, what kind of patterns would you be looking at? The time of the day, etc., right? Location, what kind of vehicles that hit the animals? I think somebody talked about that. Estimating, calculating with numbers as well. Yeah, spatial reasoning. Yes. You'd probably be looking at a map and finding out about the roads and which part of the road. Yep, fractions, decimals, percentages, ratios, yep. Okay, all of them. So you can see, actually, it's not hard to integrate like numeracy. Okay, so whatever subject that you're teaching, and you probably be integrating some part of some mathematics there. But of course, there are people asking about like, okay, what if you're just teaching mathematics, secondary maths? So just now somebody asked. So I had an activity. So I need a volunteer. So maybe Jen, you can. Okay, so imagine Jen is the. It's animal. I mean, what animal would I be? The wallaby or something. Okay, or wombat. Okay, and then maybe I'm the car that comes along. Okay, so if let's say if you look at the warning for roadkill, right? So how fast do you think Jen would react in order to get out of the way? Maybe 1 second or. Let's say 1 second, okay, for example. And imagine if I'm driving at 60 kilometers per hour. Okay, yeah, that's quite fast, but that's what, because I was looking at the danger, those websites, they say, okay, if you're driving at 60 kilometers per hour, you need to have the low beam on. So imagine if I'm driving at 60 kilometers per hour, how far away would I have to be in order to avoid hitting Jen if Jen takes like 1 second to jump? So if you think about it, it means that 60 kilometers per hour, you have to convert it to meters per second, right? So if you calculate this, actually, if you do the calculation, you do the conversion from kilometers per hour to meters per second, you find that it's about 17 meters for 60 kilometers per hour. So I have to be 17 meters away, which actually this is nowhere enough, right? So if I run along, at a certain speed, and you have to, okay. So that's that kind of. You can do a simulation like what I did. Thanks, Jen. Okay, and you can do some investigation about like how fast and what is the angle at the low beam? What does that mean? And things like that. So it's up to the imagination about what you want to do. Okay, so but if you talk about STEM integration, so what I just shared is just a small part of the investigation, because you might be, doing you might be having some sort of curriculum, you'll probably be over some time, and you'll probably be working with other teachers to implement maybe this project or this activity. So if you think about it, there is different levels of STEM integration. So I read this from the literature. I think it's kind of, you might have seen this already. So, so if you talk about it, like there's this disciplinary, which is actually the students just learn the skills separately in each discipline. Okay, that means maybe in the maths class, in the science class. And then there's a multidisciplinary where they learn the concept separately in each discipline, but with reference to a common theme. So I could have this PBL as a common theme, and then different subjects sort of use it differently. Or interdisciplinary, where it's tightly linked. So you could have a subject that is like a STEM subject, or a particular project which you have different teachers working together, or you get the students to look at different areas. And transdisciplinary. So the transdisciplinary, I think, is the next level, where the knowledge and skills are learned from different disciplines and applied to real-world problems. So I think that's what makes it different, because it's applied to real-world problems. And what you see here today, right, I think it's fantastic that we have people from the Botanic Gardens, and I think that's what makes it authentic and sort of transdisciplinary. So some things to think about is like, where does, so, I've talked to some teachers in school and about like, how do you have like how is STEM implemented in the school? So some teachers actually say, oh, it sits in maths, for example, or sits in science. Or some schools actually have like a STEM subject or integrated kind of subject or project. And then the other thing to think about is like the interdisciplinary teams. So I think it's very important to have like students, working together, maybe students with different expertise, or and teachers as well, because I think what it takes to have integrated kind of STEM is actually to work with different teachers from different subject areas. And I think that's something that's important, because as, whatever, you might have a certain expertise, let's say like mathematics, so, or science. So if you work with different teachers, you will have different perspectives, and I think that's what makes it meaningful and useful. So I've used some of the websites there, and I know I've run out of time already. So I actually had wanted to share some activity on Desmos. I think maybe you've not heard of this. My student would have heard of that. So Desmos is actually a graphing calculator website kind of thing, but it has a component where you get students to log in. The teacher creates different activities. So if you quickly log into this, you will see that the first activity is to have, I put in a picture of the Cranbourne map, and then ask you to draw where do you think is the stretch of road that needs to be looked at and why. So it has a open-ended question there. So you can have a look. Sorry, okay, so while you log in and quickly answer the question, so you can draw on this, you can draw at the side and then type in what's your reason. So I can see from the teacher dashboard all your responses. Okay, I can anonymize so that your name will not be seen. So it will be all the mathematician, scientists' names. So I'll just, all right. So I can see generally on the overlay that people really need more information. So this is just an overlay of all your responses, and you can see from here what your responses are. So this is just a particular tool that I can use as a teacher to sort of quickly see and have some feedback, so you can, part of my reason why I want to show this is just to show a particular tool. Yep. And also some possibilities that you can use in STEM class. Okay? Yeah, okay. I think I'll stop here already. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hazel. And thank you to our 4 academic specialists, I suppose, tonight in those areas. We'd like to just put it over to you now for the next few minutes. Is there anything that you feel maybe could have been added to what our experts touched on tonight with the learning? If you have an idea, please put your hand up and we'll have someone come around with a microphone. We've got Reggie at the back there. It was very comprehensive. Got one over there.
Hi, I'm from primary school area and we do get our kids to direct their inquiry learning with questions to start with, and I think the trouble we have is that because they direct the inquiry so much, we don't know when we want to speak to a specialist or an important person until we're a couple of weeks down the track, and then we have maybe 2 weeks to do that finding out. And I don't think that at the moment things are flexible enough for us to be able to get experts in within that time frame. I mean, it really inhibits what we do to follow kids' questions.
Thank you. A very important point there with the nature of inquiry or problem-based learning. Thank you. Was there another one over here? We have our online audience, so it's important that we use the microphone so they can hear as well.
I did something similar to this with a grade 5-6 class last year, and it was solutions to climate change problems. But one of the things that we found is that, yes, you can get kids to do this cold, but I do think that it's much better if you start with not the same problem you're trying to solve, but a similar type of problem, and just show kids ways to get them started. I don't think you can go in cold to these problem-solving tasks. That's just an observation, and there may be plenty of examples where that's not the case, but that, to me, that seems to be a good way of getting kids involved in this sort of stuff.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the observation there. Do we have anyone else before we move on? Now, what we had was, people unpacking each of those disciplines, but we are really pushing that sort of transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach. I think it's important that we now look at how we might be able to tie this together. So we've got Professor Amanda Berry to come up, and she's going to talk for a few minutes now about how maybe we could take this disciplinary understanding and tie it together in a problem-based or design-based learning approach.
Well, thanks. The tough tasks still last, Lucas. Thanks, everybody. And what a fantastic night and a great opportunity to be able to explore the idea of problem-based learning together, bringing our own questions and contexts into this space to ask what would it be like for me and my school and my students' learning. I really liked it that we unpacked each of these disciplinary areas from the perspectives of our experts here, because often or regularly what happens in STEM is we tend to blend things in together and we forget about the disciplinary integrity of each of the different areas in which we're working. So it's really important that Jen, for instance, picked out what is it within the science curriculum that could be a goal for learning. Not only the concepts, but the ways of working of scientists, the particular skills. And the same with Amber, the same with Hazel, and the same with Greg, although engineering is not an explicit part of the curriculum, but it has this special kind of glue that can bring everything together. And in order to be able to have a meaningful integrated STEM curriculum, or thinking about individual subjects, deciding on what the goals of learning are really important. So having a sense of what is it that you're trying to achieve in advance, and it's not just about posing a problem and standing back. Tonight we had this kind of simulated experience that was a sort of rapid design experience. But in classrooms, you will be scaffolding the learning and you will be starting from something where, what do my kids already know and where do I want to be able to take them? And am I going to be taking them there by myself? am I going to be taking them there with other teachers or other partners from the outside? And what kind of resources might I need to draw on? So having that clear sense of what you're heading towards, even though some unexpected events might pop up, is really, really an important part of what it means to learn well in STEM, as far as I understand. You're also drawing on a range of different kind of pedagogical approaches as a teacher. And Kathy raised, when she was talking about problem-based learning, all these things that are learner-focused, non-routine, unfamiliar, drawing on previous relevant knowledge, collaborative. Well, in a lot of situations, these are quite non-traditional ways of learning and teaching. And so it requires a cultural shift often within schools and for teachers and communities to start to think about shaping these problems differently. So helping kids to learn about inquiry-based approaches, design-based approaches becomes very, very important and another part of the intentional learning. How do you learn how to develop an idea? How do you learn how to test an idea? How do you think about your own thinking in relation to these? So it's a challenging transition, and you have to decide what is going to work in my context. Am I working with a whole lot of people who might be a little bit difficult to shift in terms of bringing them into a fully integrated STEM situation? But I could present them with something like this fantastic problem from Cranbourne and say, in your individual classes, in your individual subjects, we could all address this and then do something at the end. Or you could think about ways in which you can collaborate, perhaps just across a couple of disciplinary areas, and do some work together. So there's all sorts of possibilities. Hazel also outlined ways in which you might think about this as a multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach. And it's really nice to have a practical example of that, because often we talk about these things and we don't actually know what they might look like. So this was a good chance for that. I don't know if anybody's operating my slides. Thanks. That's all right. So Russell Tytler and colleagues were doing some work around STEM, actually science engagement and student learning. And it's the pedagogy that really matters. How we're going to be able to bring students into these environments, as I said, is not about minimal guidance. Here's a problem, off you go. It actually requires teachers to rethink how they use their expertise. At what point do I need to know about my learners and their learning? At what point do I need to insert some concepts here and help them to be able to figure something out so that they can move on to their next step? So it's important not to neglect the pedagogy in all of this. And some work I've been doing around this is in relation to how we might frame these different sorts of teaching approaches or pedagogies, and the inquiry and problem-based and design-based really belong to a kind of family that focus on a question or issue, have some kind of open-ended investigation, using the interpretation of information and reporting on the findings in different ways. So the engineering and tech tends to work more from solving a problem, science and maths, reasoning and explanation, but they're all generally working towards this kind of notion of pedagogical approaches that allow that to happen in the classroom. And a final slide, which is kind of a fun way of thinking about these things, that integrated STEM should be more like a lasagna than a smoothie. So that the disciplinary integrity really matters. The kids should be learning something that belongs to one of those particular disciplines, even if they're bringing it together. So like a lasagna, you can actually see, what were the individual components, even though they've been transformed in some way from their raw ingredients to this delicious dish, compared to just melding everything together into what might become some kind of assignment where kids actually aren't achieving the kind of learning goals that you might have had if you were just teaching them within the individual disciplinary areas. So that's my image message for you to take away for this evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mandy. This brings us now to the Q&A session. Now, as always, we've had a jam-packed session, so we've left ourselves only a tiny little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Chantal's got her hand up there, which I assume means we've got one from our online viewers. So we might start with that one, addressed to the panel up the front here.
Okay, great, Lucas. I've got Melinda online here with a question, but the online participants have been buzzing with discussion. So Melinda's asking, is there a bank of rich problems that lend themselves to PBL which teachers can draw upon?
There's a few sites that I know of. Right, Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority has a nice site for Victoria that's relevant to the Victorian curriculum, obviously. There's New South Wales Department of Education and the Tasmanian Department of Education all have nice examples that include assessment rubrics as well. So there's one starting point.
Would anybody else like to add to that one?
There's another one, I'm not sure if there's a particular site, but wicked problems is another one that usually a wicked problem is something that doesn't have a clear solution. So Googling something like that might also be effective.
Okay, thank you. Now we might go to our audience here tonight. Has anyone got a question they'd like to ask our panel? We'll go to the one at the back there first.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I have a question asked Dr. Greg. So about engineering, yeah. So I know, like, there's many schools in Australia. We said it's a STEM school, but according to Australian curriculum, so we have curriculum about math, technology, and science, but we don't have curriculum about engineering. So, do you have any ideas like why we lack of this part? Because we address STEM. Why could it be hard or some other things that we have the curriculum about engineering? Thank you.
I'm not a doctor either. I'm sorry, I'd love to be, but I'm not. For me, the engineering part is the linking bit between the science, the tech, and the mathematics, right? It's the recipe for the lasagna. If you apply that process, and engineering is a systematic process of applying it, guided by scientific understanding, if you apply that process over the top of the other three, you achieve the engineering. And the prototyping and testing part is probably in engineering and technology, but again, that iterative process, going backwards and forwards, and learning to fail, is the engineering. So it may not necessarily be covered in curriculum, but it's the link that allows you to gather all these ideas you have on your tables, and it's not just a plethora of things that are confusing. So that's the engineering.
Yeah, thank you. Because I was engineering student before. Because to my understanding, because engineering, like you said, it's basically the knowledge about the science, technology, and the math. It's all about this information might be students accumulated or build from primary to secondary. So it's better maybe for students, involve more about engineering when they get enough foundation knowledge. But I'm thinking like, for Monash, because we have a STEM research team. So is it possible, like we have some PhD students do something to, like you said, a discussion or explore something about how to connect engineering or apply engineering in those interdisciplinary areas. Yeah, thank you.
If I'm correct in interpreting you, we already have a really great schools and engineers connection through the engineering faculty, the same with the science faculty. So if you want to be part of that, then I suggest, well, you could contact us or engineering, but there's already quite an active group, and you'll find quite across a number of universities that the same kind of facilities are available for engineering students to come and work in classrooms with teachers or to connect with engineers generally.
I might add another plug in here. We're actually, as Faculty of Education, working with the Faculty of Engineering later this year to deliver an Engineering in Education course. So keep an eye out for that one. That's a one-day professional learning course for teachers. We might have time for one really quick question. I know Ella had her hand up here. Did you want to still ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. It's about the approach. So you've got a problem with your class. Like, which do you prefer? The kids tackle the problem individually or as a team? Because if it's really authentic, like in real life in a workplace, the loudest voices win. And do we want to protect children from that and get them to work individually, or is there value in going through the whole process together? That's it.
Wealth of educators in this room, I think, would be able to help answer that question. Ella, would anyone like to wade in there? Practical experience?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Look, there's often with things that aren't bound normal methods that you're teaching, where you say, like in mathematics, here's an example, the kids say, all right, and it works through similar to the example. When you're dealing with some sort of problem, there's a tendency often in a class, if you try to make it all individual, it just sort of frees up. They don't know where to go. But when people start bouncing ideas, and as generally, if you can structure groups with the courageous maniac, he'll lead them, he'll push somewhere, and people will go, and they'll develop, and then other people will pull back and say, well, that's not right. This is a bit too far. So groups tend to work very well. It's really off-putting when you see a whole bunch of kids all trying to do something individually, and they don't know how to start. And they just need to fall in a direction. But, it's a bit of push and shove in a group tends to make that occur.
Can I add to that too, is that one of the general capabilities is personal and social awareness, isn't it? And so that learning about how to work in a group, learning how to collaborate with others becomes a really important component of actually that integrated STEM process. So building in deliberate opportunities in the teaching to be explicit about how are we going to manage if one person tries to take over, or how are you going to include everybody, or will there be a specific role for everybody in the group, becomes another way of developing the capabilities of the students along with the concepts and the skills, etc. So it's a really great question because, and it's the same with the pedagogies, it's not just posing a problem and standing back, it's actually curating a learning environment by teachers for their students that includes these elements of learning how to learn together, and learning what to learn. So those things I think that you highlight become really essential and quite demanding ways for teachers to use their expertise to support learning in integrated STEM.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our experts or panellists tonight, first of all. So we give them a round of applause, please. I'd also like to thank the people who managed to be here in person and those people who are joining along online for your contributions to tonight. Obviously, it required a lot of audience contribution, and it was fantastic to see the discussion going on. Now, I encourage you to give us some feedback. We love to know what you think, what you'd like to hear about at future STEMinars. So there's a link there to a feedback form. If you could be kind enough to fill that out for us, that would be fantastic. And to keep an eye on future events coming up, there's a link there as well. Now, can I just ask that, as Maddie's going to add one more thing, but just before she does, as you walk out tonight, can I ask you to take your rubbish with you, please, so that it limits our clean-up as you leave the room. Thanks, Maddie.
And Kathy Smith mentioned that we don't know as much as we would like to about what happens in teachers' classrooms related to problem-based learning, integrated STEM. If you're interested to be in contact with us, we would love to come and have a chat with you about what you're doing in your classroom. It can be in an early stage, in a middle stage, an advanced stage, it doesn't matter, but we're really keen to have some conversations with you and to learn about what you're doing. So feel free to let any one of us know and we can follow up with you. Thanks, Lucas.
I would highly recommend that you contact me first and I can pass your query on to any of our academics. So if you want to come up and grab a card off me, feel free. Thank you again for your contribution tonight and enjoy your night. Thank you.